Okay, so again, every time you sit down, it's useful to follow roughly the same kind of procedure, to go through the various steps to make sure that you are at ease, that you have reasonable degree of mindfulness, that you enjoy what you're doing, and to establish these basic principles first of all. As the retreat progresses, you can go through the steps more quickly because presumably your mind is going to be more prepared. But still, it is nice to make sure everything is in the right place, because when they are in the right place, then that is where the meditation happens. And as you settle down and as you learn to stay with the breath, you learn to be at ease, make sure that you are really cool about things. You are standing back, you are just observing. You're not really involved in things. Remember that whatever happens in meditation are all natural phenomena. It is like what happens to a mind, what happens to the world, if you like. It has nothing to do with you. And because it has nothing to do with you, there's nothing to be excited about or to be interested in. You're cool, you're standing by, you're watching and observing what is happening. And if you get some joy, you're just observing the joy as a natural phenomenon. If the breath becomes beautiful and peaceful and calm, you're observing the natural, beautiful and calm breath. You're not involved in the breath. It is not yours. You're standing back and observing all of these things. And as you learn this attitude towards all phenomena, you don't get pulled in by things. You learn to be with rather than trying to control or rather than getting excited about things. In this way, it becomes a beautiful, peaceful meditation, just enjoying whatever happens. You never know what's going to happen anyway, so getting excited is never a good idea. So just enjoy without involvement. Okay, so again, just spend a few moments just reviewing the meditation. Yeah. Okay, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, so let us see what the evening brings. So here we go. Question number 1. Dear Ajahn, regarding the sutta streams, I looked up the Pali words translated as enmity and affliction. Does verang mean having a feeling of enmity and hostility towards other? Yes, it does. Or having enemies, in other words, beings feeling enmity towards you. It could mean both, depending on the context. Depending on how it is used. Could mean either way. But I think in that case, you are, because you don't have any, you create kind of kindness towards others. You don't have any enmity towards others. You don't feel the hostility of others either. So I think it goes kind of both ways, and the word is used in both ways there. So what about abhyapajja? So that is, in a Thai translation of the word for spreading metta to oneself. Ahang sukhito homi, abhyapajja homi. It talks about may I not oppress and be oppressed, rather may I be free of affliction, oppression. Does this indicate the Pali words implies a sense of mutuality, mutual non-oppression, as well as mutual non-enmity for Vera, or at least the Thai translators thought so. So I think the idea is that when you give, what you are giving these things, and the word themselves don't really mean mutuality, it just means that you give non-hatred and you give non-oppression or non-affliction. I think here affliction and oppression is basically the same, because when you oppress someone, well, then you afflict them. So this the kind of, I would say these things are alternative translations of the same thing, abhyapajja. And vera usually means enmity, or sometimes translated as hatred as well. So you give non-enmity, you give non-oppression, and then you experience non-oppression in return. They are the words are used twice. First you give it, and then you receive it afterwards. So the word itself does not imply mutuality. It just that's why it is used twice in that sutta. That's how I understand it. I should have maybe brought my laptop with me, so I could have looked this up on the spot. But that's how I remember that sutta going. So I hope that makes sense. If not, please ask again, and we'll see if we can get it clarified. Okay. Dear Ajahn, what do you think about this? Yonaso manasikara, origins conditionality, or yoniso is origin conditionality, kara more active more active than attention. So instead of wise attention, application of the mind to conditionality. Okay, which is more specific, but arises out of faith in a specific teaching here. And perhaps it is more instructive and practical way to think about it. And so maybe it is more of a natural lead into situational awareness as you talk about it, not to do with mindfulness of activities, but rather to do with more purposeful way of being, leading naturally to sense restraint. Thank you so much for any comment. So yoni is the source of something. Yeah, it means the source. So it's like and manasikara literally, it literally means the work of the mind. Manas is the mind, kara is work or activity or what you do. And so when you attend to something, the mind is working. Yeah, attention is actually active. Because attention, you decide to attend to this or you attend to that. So that is kind of the work of the mind when you attend to something. And so I think manasikara in the sutras, it is often also used without yoniso. It is used kind of on its own. And it has this idea of applying the mind in a certain direction, which is what attention means. Yeah, attention is willed. Attention is not just something that happens on its own. It is you're using the mind willfully to attend to something. And yes, yoniso means origin, so it can mean attending to the source of things or the conditionality of things, if you like. So yes, it can mean cause. Some people have suggested cause-wise attention or conditionality-wise attention. But of course, all of that is ultimately comes down to the idea of rational or wise or causal attention. All of these things are ballpark the same ideas. Because if your attention is wise, it is precisely about understanding the causes. Yeah, so it is it's a wise attention to causes or conditionality, something like that. The definition of yoniso manasikara, you can read the definition if you like. It is found in the Sabbasava Sutta, the second sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya, all the taints. And there, yoniso manasikara is defined simply as whenever the wholesome qualities of the mind are increasing and the unwholesome qualities are going down, that is a case of yoniso manasikara. Yeah, so whenever the good qualities are going up, the bad are going down, that is the case of yoniso manasikara. And that is something that follows you all along the path, yeah, from the very beginning to the very end. So from the moment you decide to listen to the Dhamma or hang out with the noble ones or hang out with the Buddha, you're going to listen to the Buddha and you think, wow, this is really cool stuff, this is good stuff. And that is yoniso manasikara, because you are appreciating the Dhamma in the right way. You're attending it in a way that you appreciate it. And then all the way through the path until you eventually become an arahant, the very last moment when you apply the mind in such a way that you become an arahant, that is also yoniso manasikara, and all the way in between. So it is this universal correct usage of the mind. And usually that correct usage means going back to causes and going back to conditionality. The point about the word like yoniso, even though the root meaning of the word is womb. Yeah, the womb is the source of something, like the source of a baby. Yeah, would be the womb, and so that is the root meaning of it. But this is not yoni. This is yoniso. It has the so ending, and the so ending is a grammatical ending that sometimes can give the word a different meaning. So it's not as simple as just meaning source. There's something more to this. Yeah, if it just meant source or cause, another word is more likely to be used. A word like pacchaya or hetu. Hetu quite literally means cause. Pacchaya is like a condition. But yoni is actually the womb. So it is like maybe the origin, but maybe also not exactly that. Yeah, so you can see that it is a bit complicated. It is not as simple as just taking the root meaning of the word. really the only way to understand Yoniso Manasikara is to see the context. And the most important context is Majjhima Nikaya 2, the Sabbasava Sutta. And there it is always about giving rise to wholesome qualities and reducing the unwholesome qualities. And that, I would say, in the kind of broader sense of the word, is basically about wise attention. That is what reduces the bad qualities and increases the good qualities. Sati Sampajanya, the situational awareness, mindfulness and situational awareness, and Sangvara, well, these are specific examples of Yoniso Manasikara. Yeah, so you can say they lead to these things, but they are also examples of that. But they are more specific, so they are more limited in their application, whereas Yoniso Manasikara is applicable for the entire path. So that's how I would regard that. So. Okay, let us go on to the next one. Dear Ajahn, are there any differences between the Pali version and the Chinese version of the suttas? Thank you. Yes, sometimes there are small differences. The versions that we find in Chinese language, in Chinese characters, they are the product of other schools of Buddhism. So in the Chinese Tipitaka, it's a very, very large collection. It is much larger than the Pali collection. And the reason is because one of the reasons, if we just, let's just contain ourselves to the actual suttas, the Sutta Pitaka, if you like. Now that is also, that's only a small part of what is called the Chinese canon, which is enormous. It has all kind of content. But if you go to the smallest part, which is known as the Agamas, those Agamas are the transmission of suttas from different schools. In the Pali Buddhism, it's only one school. In the Chinese translation, it comes from a number of schools. So, for example, you have the Dirgha Agama, which is equivalent to the Digha Nikaya. It comes from the Dharmaguptaka school, one of the ancient schools of Buddhism. And then you have the Madhyama Agama and the Sangyukta Agama. These are from mostly from the Sarvastivadin school. Then you have the Ekotara Agama, which no one knows which school it is. Some people say it's the Mahasangika, but it is uncertain which school it is. So it is a very kind of heterodox collection, very kind of diverse collection of suttas in the Agamas. And so for that reason, it comes from different schools. These schools separated maybe starting about a couple of hundred years after Buddha. They started to go to different parts of India. Sarvastivadana and Dharmaguptaka went to the north of India. The Theravadins, what became the Theravadins, went to the south. This already happened a couple of hundred years after the Buddha. They started to spread out over the vast Indian subcontinent. And the schools were created in part because of geographical distances. It wasn't so much that they necessarily disagreed about anything. It's just that when you live far apart, you create your own schools. And because they were so far apart, then they would start to diverge a little bit. Because when you have to memorize suttas, then sometimes you get it slightly wrong, and you get kind of slight differences between the various schools. But what is amazing is not the differences. What is amazing is the similarities. These have been separate for 2,300 years, 2,200 years. That's a long time, One was in the north of India, then they went from the north of India onto the Silk Road, this famous trade route that kind of passes through Central Asia. And the monks would follow the trade caravans, and they would kind of set up Buddhist establishments along the Silk Road. That's why you have lots of ancient Buddhist establishments in Central Asia, and eventually they will reach China, and they will cross into the border of China. And of course, when you go to China, you had to translate into Chinese, otherwise the Chinese wouldn't have no idea what was going on. So they would have this kind of groups of people coming together to translate the suttas. That one would recite it in Sanskrit or in Gandhari or whatever the original language was. Then you would have someone to translate it into Chinese, a group of people. Then you have a scribe who would inscribe it with Chinese characters. And this is how these translations happened. Yeah, and some of these translators became very famous. Xuanzang, a very famous a pilgrim who went all the way to India and brought all the scriptures back. He was also one of the most famous translators. Apparently, I can't read Chinese, but apparently very beautifully translated into Chinese characters. And so this is how this happened. But it started out 2,200, 2,300 years ago. It started to diverge. And then if you take the Pali now, if you can read both ancient Chinese characters or Middle Chinese, and you can also read Pali and Sanskrit, and not many people can read all of those languages, but there are some people, some scholars who can read Sanskrit, Pali, Chinese, Tibetan, German, French, English, Russian. It's like amazing. Some people are just very, very good with languages. And if you look at it, sometimes it is almost interchangeable, and that's how close it is. Sometimes some of the words are changed. Sometimes there are some problems, like a passage may have been lost from one sutta, but it is in the other one. But all the core doctrines are almost interchangeable. Like the sutta we were reading today, the one about what is the purpose. That sutta, if you look at that one in the take the translation into Chinese, that have been translated from Chinese now into English. So it went from Sanskrit to Chinese and now back into English again. And so you can compare it with the Pali translation. And if you put them side by side, you would be hard pressed to tell which one is which. They're so close. So many of the core doctrines are exactly the same. And that is what gives you a sense of confidence that the teachings of the Buddha have been preserved. We still have the teachings of the Buddha. If they have been preserved so well for 2,300 years, it's only another 200 years and you're back to the lifetime of the Buddha. It says something about the conservatism of the people who preserved these texts. And because they were so conservative for so long, presumably they were also conservative for the first part of the period. So it's kind of, it's nice. But sometimes the differences can also be very useful because sometimes you wonder whether something has gone wrong in the Pali. So sometimes you can have a correction of the Pali text. I think the Pali is always going to be the most valued of all the texts, basically because it is very close to the language of the Buddha. Once you translate it into different language, you lose some of the origins and that sort of thing. So the Pali, to me, is always the most important one. But sometimes you can gain some corrections or some alternative views by considering these different schools and the different languages and things. That can be very, very useful sometimes. You gain a better understanding of the historical transmission of these texts by taking all of these various schools into account. All right. Venerable Sir, are the 4 Brahma Viharas given in rank order? If so, what is the basis of the ranking? Does the attainment of the higher order quality replace the lower one, or do the acquired qualities coexist? What exactly is upekkha? Is it a state of cold logic? That is interesting. Cold logic, I like that one. Devoid of love and compassion, such that the killing of disease causing vermin is disallowed because both life forms of vermin and humans are considered equal. I see. Or the upekkha mind will allow the killing of the vermin as an exception to save human lives. Thank you. Okay, so are they given in rank order? Yes. Everything in the Dhamma is in ranks, and that nothing is really random. And this is kind of one of those very important principles to understand. It helps you to interpret the suttas and understand what is going on. And the same thing is true of the Brahma Viharas. And so the most basic one is metta. And when you read the suttas, it becomes very clear that the Buddha talks about metta more often than the other Brahma Viharas. For example, you have suttas like the Metta Anisangsa Sutta, the benefits of metta. You don't have the Karuna Anisangsa Sutta. You don't have the Mudita Anisangsa Sutta, the Upekkha Anisangsa, just metta. Metta is more foundational. And one of the reasons is because it's kind of fairly straightforward. You feel friendly with somebody, you see their good qualities, and you feel a sense of goodwill towards them. And we all know what that means. And there is no drawbacks really with having metta. Metta is a very positive quality, and it's always very beneficial to develop. Karuna is the second most important one. And I think the reason why it comes in that order, karuna is compassion, it is second because karuna focuses on the suffering of another person. And when you focus on suffering, there's always a danger that you will feel a bit sad maybe. If you go wrong with the compassion, if you do too much of that, you may feel a bit dejected and sad because so much suffering in the world there. And so it is more tricky to get that one right. If you focus in the right way, it's not a problem, but if you get it wrong, then it can be more problematic. And so there is a natural sequence. The next one is pamudja. It is where you are kind of glad at the spiritual successes of other people. When someone else is very successful, you think, yay! You got a jhana, wow, how wonderful, that means there's hope for me as well. If you got a jhana, I also have a hope, And again, this is an area where it is easy to have jealousy sometimes. If someone else is successful and you are not, maybe you might feel jealous. And that's the opposite of what you want to do. So it is, again, a little bit more tricky than metta. Metta is this pure sense of kindness towards somebody simply because they are your friend or whatever. So it's a bit more tricky. So this general gladness at the good qualities of people in the world. And then upekkha is a state where you go kind of beyond the ordinary emotions. It's a state where your mind is completely even, where the mind is completely neutral. You have gone beyond joy, you have been gone beyond any kind of happiness, and you are just observing. And that is why upekkha is the most powerful state of all, because that is the foundation for insight. The highest kind of insight is when you are able to observe in an entirely neutral, balanced kind of way. You're just observing what is going on. You're seeing your own 5 khandhas, that's the main observation, and you can see those khandhas neutrally without being attached to the good feelings of metta, attached to the good feelings of karuna, compassion, and these things. But you have a kind of very, very good balance in the mind. And so that's why the 4th jhana is the end of the path, because the 4th jhana is also upekkha. Upekkha is the main characteristic of the 4th jhana, very similar to the 4th Brahma Vihara. So there's a natural progression there to the most powerful of all things. So what does it mean in terms of, does it mean that you see beings as the same? It's not really about seeing beings as the same. That's not what it is about. It's about having the ability to observe, without bias. That is what it is about. It doesn't mean that you kind of have a preference or a vermin is the same as a human being or anything like that. It just means you see things neutrally. You would still value human life more. Why? Well, simply because it is more valuable. So you would still do that. It's just an unbiased view of things. So what about killing vermin to save human life? And I would say that it depends. If it is a parasite in the body that is causing a lot of havoc, is it okay to kill that parasite? Well, the answer is it depends. It depends on how serious it is. It depends on what kind of parasite. If it's going to kill you, then most people would probably choose to kill the parasite. So it depends on all kind of factors. But normally, I would say that to look after your health is probably very important. And in these cases, it's probably one of the few exceptions to that rule of not killing living beings, that normally most people would break it. Would an arahant break it? That's an interesting question, because it says that an arahant is incapable of intentionally taking life. So an arahant might say, no, let that vermin be. If it wants to feed off my body, no worries, it's not my body anyway, so it doesn't really matter. The arahant would be pretty cool about those things. So the very highest quality, but it's possible to achieve, we might not want to kill even those parasites of the human body. I would guess, this is just how, because that's how arahants work. So if you are very, very pure, you might decide not to do that. So again, it's a complicated question here. There's no kind of one-sided thing, but I don't think anyone would blame you if you were to kill a parasite. Okay. Dear Ajahn, thank you for the wonderful teaching. The Visuddhimagga talks about the path of insight. Is there any correlating map in the suttas? The Visuddhimagga has what is known as the vipassana jnanas, the vipassana knowledges. And the idea there is that you gain knowledge by observing things. Vipassana basically means clear seeing. And so when you clearly, sometimes translated as insight, but I prefer clear seeing. So it is the knowledge that arises from seeing things clearly, basically. And it is, I think, 16, is it? 16 vipassana jnanas as a large series of various knowledges. And some of those are found in the suttas. And they are found mostly in the sutta called the Rattavanita Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 24, the stagecoach simile. And they are found in that sutta, and almost only in that sutta, nowhere else in the entire canon, really. So that is the foundation for the Visuddhimagga. The Visuddhimagga then adds a number of more insights, or clear seeings to that. So the question sometimes arises, should you follow those sequence in the Visuddhimagga? It is very common in various Vipassana schools to take the Visuddhimagga as the ultimate guide to meditation, and they will see you should look out for these knowledges, according to the Visuddhimagga system. And is that okay? Maybe it is okay. I don't know. I have never followed that system. And it may be okay, but I must admit that what I have seen of those systems, sometimes they can lead astray. I've seen people certainly having all kinds of weird things happening to them and coming to me and being told that, I was told by this Vipassana system that I'm a stream enter, but then I didn't believe it. That's kind of what I've been told. And if you don't believe it, then guaranteed you're not a stream enter, because if you are a stream enter, something has really happened, like a revolution in your mind has happened. So, if someone says, if you have that experience, then someone says, well, that is stream enter, you will accept that. So it can lead astray because you start looking for these things. You start reading your experience into the experiences, things that are not really there, and it can lead you astray. It doesn't mean it always is wrong. Sometimes it may work for some people. It's very hard to tell. But I think it is better just to follow the way it is done in the suttas. And the main way it is done in the suttas is becoming peaceful, contemplating the khandhas. Khandha contemplation is kind of the standard way. And the way you do that is after you come out of a peaceful meditation, you reflect back and you contemplate what happened. And the deeper the meditation is, the more powerful that reflection is going to be. That is kind of the standard way that vipassana or insight happens in the suttas. But the suttas also have, and this is what is very interesting, they have this large number of perceptions, sannyas, developing the perceptions about the world. In other words, you learn to see the world in a certain way through the lens of the Dhamma. This is very, very common in the suttas. And so you have the anicca sanya, for example, the perception of impermanence. And so you look at the world through that lens of impermanence. And you start to see the world like that. And suddenly, when you start to see the world through that lens, it is almost as if the world becomes like a teacher to you. Because everything opens up seen through the lens of the Dhamma. Everything, you can start to see impermanence in the world. When you see the war in Ukraine, you think, I expected that. Not because you expected that specific war, but you expected impermanence to happen, unreliability, uncertainty. Earthquakes, climate change, wars, dying, illness, change in general is what you come to expect. Things are unreliable, uncertain. This is the anicca sanya. You apply it also to yourself, to your own life. You expect to get old, you expect to get sick, you expect to die. All of these things kind of start to become clear to you. So there's a large number of these perception sannyas in the sutta: anatta sanya, dukkha sanya, viraga sanya, pahana sanya, and a large number of more: ahara patikula sanya, sabbiloka nibiratta sanya, etc., etc., that you can use. And they all revolve around, generally around the three characteristics: impermanence, suffering, and non-self. That's what they revolve around. And so that is the kind of vipassana, if you like, clear seeing that you find in the suttas. And it's a bit different from the Visuddhimagga. The Visuddhimagga is more like systematizing things. And a lot of the meditation traditions around the world that you see, there's a large number of them, they tend to have these systems, systems based on later explanations, what you find in the commentaries and sub-commentaries. And you go through very specific stages and these kind of things. But the Buddha doesn't really teach like that. It is not as systematized. It's more flexible. You are more responsible for seeing what is going on, taking charge of your meditation. Yeah, so it's more like just the Eightfold Path. To me, the Eightfold Path is the Visuddhimagga. That is the real Visuddhimagga. Path of purification. Yeah, Visuddhi is purity or purification. Magga is the path. That is the Eightfold Path, yeah? All the virtues, all the right effort, the meditation, it's all about purity, purity, purity. So that is the Visuddhimagga. The other Visuddhimagga, maybe also the Visuddhimagga, but the real Visuddhimagga in the suttas. That's what I say. Isn't that kind of nice? I prefer to bring things back to the suttas. Anyway, that's a long answer to a short question, so there you are. Dear Ajahn, I have benefited so much from your teachings. I'm very, very happy to hear that. That's wonderful. My question is, why do you give so much of your time teaching when you have given so much up to be on the Buddha's path? I hope your question does not offend. Well, first of all, I also spend a lot of time not teaching. Yeah, you may see me teaching sometimes, but there's a lot of hours in the day. There's a lot of times during the year, like the Rains Retreat, and even outside of the Rains Retreat, when I don't do all that much teaching. And so it just depends. But teaching is it's a wonderful thing to do because you learn a lot from teaching. Yeah, it means that you have to consider the suttas carefully. It means you get reminded yourself. Whenever I teach you, I also get reminded. Well, I said, what? Why? I'm not doing that. I'm telling everyone to contemplate death. But what about me? Am I doing it properly or not? So you feel a bit embarrassed if you teach everyone, but you don't do it yourself. You know that feeling? You feel a bit hypocritical when that happens. And so this is kind of one of the things about being a teacher. It kind of encourages you to make sure that you also do things properly and in the right way. It reminds you of the Dhamma. Yes, there can be sometimes too much teachings, and so you need to find that balance. Because if it's too much, then of course you don't need that many reminders. So you find that balance there somewhere. But teaching is a very nice thing to be able to do. Yeah, it is kind of, it makes you reflect on what is going on. It enhances your own life. In one of the suttas, I think it's called the Gopalaka Sutta, the Cowherd Sutta, it talks about teaching being one of the qualities of a monastic who is kind of well-rounded, in the monastic practice. And so it's one of the things that you are supposed to do, at least some of it, not too much. And then you're on the right track, But I find it very useful, and it forces me always, instead of, there's many other things that I can spend my time on as well, apart from meditation, like working in the monastery or writing things or whatever, but it kind of gets the attention back to the basic suttas again, again and again and again, having to reflect on them, having to kind of use this as the mainstay of your monastic life. And in that sense, it is very, very useful. So, so please feel free to ask these kind of questions, because I don't get offended that easily, so that's okay. You can ask those things. Okay. So here we have another one. How do I bring more warmth to my perceptions and interactions with others, when my defilements and theirs are so unpredictable and confusing. So one of the ways of having more warmth in your interactions with others is to have more compassion. One of the things when you are aware of all of these defilements that you have and other people have, remember you are trapped by those defilements. You don't choose to have them. If I told you don't have any defilements for the next week, you couldn't do it. Guaranteed you're going to have some defilements arising. You're going to get a bit irritated, or you're going to have some desires that come up, or you're going to feel a bit dull or whatever. There's always some defilements around for most people, at least occasionally. Some people have a lot, some people have less. And because you are trapped by those defilements, because they are a conditioning from the past, you never asked for those defilements, you don't really want to have them, but you can't get rid of them. So have compassion for yourself, for goodness sake, because you are a victim of those defilements, and so are other people. And so by understanding how conditioned we are as human beings, we can have compassion for each other, because we are all trapped, in a sense, by these defilements, by the problems in our life. The more you understand the idea of non-self, that we are this conditioned phenomena in the world who are trapped by our past, trapped by our conditioning, trapped by who our parents were, our past lives, everything like that, the more compassion you start to have for yourself and for others. And compassion brings warmth with it. You feel like you want to give people a hug if you have compassion for them. You want to say, I feel for you. I'm really sorry that you have all of those problems, That's what you want to do. Warmth comes out naturally when you see how trapped people are. And you want to be kind to people as a consequence. You feel more friendliness and all of these kind of things. At the very least, you want to give people a pat on the back and be kind to them when you see this. So that's kind of one of the ways I would do this. Another way of doing this is not just to have compassion, but also deliberately go out of your way to see the good qualities in people, because there are lots of good qualities to be seen, and to rejoice in that. There is in a group like this, there are so many good qualities. A few dodgy ones, few dodgy qualities, but mostly good qualities. And what a wonderful thing that is. Everyone here wants to live a good life. Everyone here wants to do their best, to do something positive for themselves and for others. And that is such a wonderful thing. And it is worthy of so much respect. So respect all of these people around you here. Respect all the people in the world who are trying to live a good life. And there's a lot of people who try, despite the difficulties, despite the conditioning from the past. It's worth celebrating when you see goodness in the world. There is a lot of goodness in the world. So in this way, you feel more warmth towards other people. Even people who may not be warm towards you, you can feel warmth towards them, because you understand that they are trapped. Cold people, you can be warm against them. People who abuse you, you can be warm against them, towards them. Why? Because you understand, actually, they are trapped by that coldness, by that abusiveness. They don't really want to be that way. If they could, they probably would want to be friendly. So this is how you gradually build it up. All right. So, next one. Dear Ajahn, I am currently involved in a legal dispute. Okay. I hope it's not with one of your co-retreatants here, who... that would be tricky, wouldn't it, if the kind of by accident they came together and they were sitting next to each other in the hall. That would be very interesting. We're practicing the Dhamma to the highest level. Okay, so most of the time I don't feel too attached, but sometimes I feel sad and angry for being wronged. How can I proceed with equanimity and compassion for the other parties? Thank you so much for all your teachings. So, yes, what you have to do is that you have to remember that the other person probably thinks that they are doing the right thing in their own way. Even if they are wrong, and I don't have any doubt that you are, that may very well be right. I don't know exactly where you're coming from, of course. But even if you are right and the other person is completely wrong and doing this for the wrong reasons, somehow they think they are right. They think that this is the right thing to do. In one way or another, they rationalize this. And so what you have to do is to understand the power of delusion, the power of confusion, the power of wanting to see or seeing what you want to see. Because you want to see it so badly, you will see it. And wrong becomes right, and right becomes wrong, and up becomes down, and black becomes white because of that. And so have compassion for this person, because if they are as deluded as you are suggesting here, it means that, they are kind of, many other things in their life is very likely to go wrong. Many other things, they are probably likely to live immorally in certain ways and kind of destroy their own life and destroy their own future as a consequence. So people who are, do stupid things, again, the idea is to have compassion for them. And so whenever you have a difficulty in life like this, it is an opportunity. Every difficulty is an opportunity. You learn how to deal with other people who are difficult. You can grow in compassion and kindness by doing that in the right way. I've seen that in my own life. You may think that monastic life is a kind of a piece of cake, so easy because everyone is really friendly and kind and everyone hugs each other and that kind of stuff. But actually, no, it is not quite like that. Monastic life, you have all kinds of people. People become monks for all kinds of reasons, and some people are more difficult than others. And some people come into monastic life, they may have mental problems because that's kind of, what happens as well, and can create havoc in the community for all kinds of reasons. So it is just as much a training ground sometimes as lay life. Maybe it's not, and you have many other things in monastic life that are really great, but sometimes people can be difficult there too. And so then you learn. You learn to have compassion. You learn to see people in the right way, and you create that warmth in your own life towards others. And that is kind of what you have to do here. So have compassion for this person, if you can. Let it go. They don't know what they're doing. And that's okay, because that is to be expected in the world. That's what conditioning does to you. So similar to the previous question, really, the answer. Okay, dear Ajahn, this morning I experienced a very peaceful and tranquil meditation. Congratulations, that's absolutely wonderful, that's what we are here for. When I started to lose the sense of my body, I could not feel if my mouth was open or closed. The thought question then arose, should I try to sense my mouth? Then I did and realized it was almost half open and saliva was about to drool out. What should I do next time this happens? I swallowed my saliva and started all over again. So don't worry if you are drooling. Allow the drooling to happen. And if you look like a fool to others, it does not matter. If they think you are a fool, they are actually the fool, not you. So if we see you drooling somewhere, if I'm going to look out tomorrow, see if anyone is drooling in the assembly. No, I don't even look at people, to be honest with you. You can do exactly what you like. I probably wouldn't even notice. But don't worry about these things. If your meditation is nice and peaceful, just carry on. And if other people think you look funny, so what? This is not about other people. This is about you. It's about your meditation. And so just carry on, the way you are. As long as you feel happy, as long as you feel nice and balanced, as long as the mind is in the right place, what the body does is kind of completely irrelevant. So I would say don't worry about that. Okay. Dear Ajahn, your profound teachings are giving me great joy and insight. Thank you for dedicating your life like this to humankind. Could you please talk about grace and if it relates to the jhanas, and if so, the power of grace and the impact on life? Forever grateful. Grace. So grace is like a Christian concept, really. And the grace, I guess, means that you are in God's grace. I guess it means that God's look after you or something like that. I'm not all that fluent with Christian ideas. I've never been a Christian myself. I've always been I was non-religious or atheist before I became a Buddhist. And so I think that Buddhism and atheism go really well together. But so grace, I'm not entirely sure what it means even. It just means, I suppose, that God looks after you, or maybe fortune looks after you, or something like that. And so I would say that in Buddhism we don't have grace, we have good karma instead. Good karma is your grace. And so if you live well, that good karma will start to work on you very quickly. As soon as you start to be kind, suddenly you just start to feel better. Things start to go right in your life. Things don't go wrong as they used to do anymore. Sometimes the devas may intercede on your behalf, and suddenly take over and make sure that you are okay, because that's what happens to really good people sometimes. That is a kind of grace, I suppose. The most important thing is to live a life of as high a degree of morality and purity and kindness as you can, and things tend to go right for you. I've noticed that in my own life, how as I gradually become a better person, and you may not have liked me the way I was maybe 30 years ago when I started out on this monastic life. I was different from what I'm now. That's to be expected. And things weren't as easy. Now things tend to be very easy, I find, in life. You just go with the flow and somehow it works out. And very often you don't try to make it work out. You just allow it to be. And then somehow it kind of resolves itself. That is a kind of grace. Things just move on. They flow on in life. You don't really have to do very much. Too often I think we do too much. We try to solve problems when actually you don't really have to solve it. It resolves itself. Very often the best way to live is to be a procrastinator. Procrastinate to the max. That's what I say. Especially if you have something really difficult and yucky you have to deal with. Don't deal with it. Let it be. That's what I say. Ajahn Brahmali is also like that. If something difficult, he doesn't do anything. He just lets it be. And then sometimes a solution just comes along. Okay, let's take that solution. And a lot of the time that is the best way to do. Just be kind and then see what happens. And kind of grace tends to come your way. Not sure if I have understood grace properly, but something like that. Dear Ajahn, yesterday my query on craving in the current life, having no bearing in the present life, is based on dependent origination spanning across 3 lives. Isn't craving, clinging, and existence causes for rebirth and death in the future, next life? Okay, I see. Yes, it is a craving, leads to rebirth in the future life. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have any bearing on this life. It does, but obviously it's not the same kind of bearing, it's a different kind of bearing that it has in this life. So if you have a lot of craving, you are going to do lots of things that may give rise to bad karma. A lot of craving means you probably get upset and angry sometimes. You're going to act on that upset. Maybe you're going to do things based on greed and all of these kind of things. And so craving will affect how you live this life. And so keep craving in check. Don't crave too much. Don't crave stupid things. Crave good things. There is good craving, there is bad craving. The good craving is the craving wanting to come to Jhana Grove, and then winning the lottery, and yay, I made it through to Jhana Grove. That's a good kind of desire. It may not be a craving, but it's a kind of desire that you have. So that paradox is actually spoken about in the suttas, the paradox of having desire leading to the end of the desire. You have to have some desire to be able to practice the Noble Eightfold Path. That is the desire that leads to the end of desire. So make sure you have good cravings, cravings that align as much as possible with the teaching of the Buddha. Try to reduce the bad cravings, because that will affect this present life as well. But you will be more happy, more balanced, a better practitioner, and your path will go much more smoothly for you as a consequence. Okay. Dear Ajahn, thank you. I have thoroughly enjoyed all your teachings. I have a stupid question and mean no offense. I've just heard this before. There was another one, no offense question before. Okay, so let's see if you now are able to offend me. Let's see. Let's see what happens. If the Dhamma penetrates a wider population and more people go forth to become monks and nuns, then who will be left to plant the crops, to do the cooking and repair the cars? Thank you. So wouldn't that be great? Yeah, wouldn't that be wonderful if so many people became monks and nuns that there was no one left to repair the cars? Yeah, actually we'd just forget about the cars. Yeah, we wouldn't drive cars anymore. We'd start walking instead, and that's what we would be doing. And I think if that happened, then you would change the way monastic life works. Yeah, because then you realize you can't live like that anymore, and so maybe then you would repair your own cars. In fact, that is already happening. You will be surprised. One of the monks at Bodhinana Monastery is a mechanic, or he used to be a mechanic. He still repairs the cars. Yeah, except when it gets too much for him, okay, we send it off to the kind of the nearest repair shop or whatever. But basically, that's already happening. Yeah, and sometimes in the monastery, if there is a lack of kind of anagarikas, where sometimes the monks go down and at least they do the dishwashing. Yeah, they don't do the cooking yet, but that might be the next step. And so you adjust a little bit depending on the circumstances. But the reality is, this is never ever going to happen. Yeah, it is absolutely impossible that this is going to happen, because if you look at how many monks and nuns are there in Australia, yeah, how many? It's maybe a few hundred, and there's 25 or 28 million people or whatever in Australia. It's a tiny, minute fraction. Even among the Buddhist population, it is a non-issue, and it is never ever going to happen. And so you don't have to worry about this. Yeah, so this is kind of the thing. I've heard this kind of argument before, but it doesn't really cut any ice with me, because it just is impossible. I think this is kind of the nature of things, that the vast majority of the population is not really ready to become monastics, and so it isn't going to happen. And so I'm going to tell you, whoever asked this question, that this is no excuse for not becoming a monk, yeah, or a nun. So if you think you can get out of monkhood simply by this logic, I say no, you can't do that. So you have to also become a monk if you... So anyway, that's my answer. It's amazing. Sometimes we find dodgy excuses for not kind of entering the monastic life, so please don't use those dodgy excuses. Dear Ajahn, thank you for your inspiring style of teaching the Dhamma. As a general inspirational topic, we would like to hear about any experiential revelations between mind and body connections announced in the West that you may have read about recently. Okay, so experimental, I think, experiential revelation between mind and body connections. So this is a very interesting topic, and there is a lot of research in this area. And it is an area, you have the near-death experiences, for example, that people are talking about. And those people who know says there isn't really any good explanation for these things. From the normal kind of materialist, physicalist way of looking at the world, you can't really explain these things very well. There are many interesting phenomena. One of the interesting phenomena that you hear about, that I've talked about before, is what they call the idea of terminal lucidity. And terminal lucidity means that some people, when they come very close to their death, they may have been demented, had Alzheimer's or whatever, and suddenly they become clear. You haven't been able to recognize your family for 10 years, and then suddenly in the last few hours, the last few days, son, daughter, hi, nice to see you again. Yeah, it's been a long time, hasn't it? 10 years since you last remembered them. And this is very, very hard to explain from a normal medical point of view, because the brain is damaged. How come suddenly you can remember people just before you die? But from a Buddhist point of view, it makes sense, because they're starting to kind of separate. You're starting to move on. That diseased brain is becoming kind of a non-issue, because you are kind of moving on to something else. So from a Buddhist point of view, it makes good sense. Because there is a fair amount of evidence like this. Of course, you have the famous stories of children who remember past lives. Why shouldn't we take that seriously? I think we should take it very seriously. Little children, why would they lie about such things? There's no reason why they would. And sometimes there can be some very powerful confirmation of these stories and these memories. There is some other interesting, I remember one experiment I read about, I think I may have mentioned this before, but this is people who use hallucinogenic drugs, like magic mushrooms and these kind of things. And this is now being used more in the West also as a kind of therapy in small doses, because apparently it has good effect on depression and these kind of things. And when these are done under controlled experiments, and they look at the brain activity of people, the brain activity goes down. But the kind of experience that people have under these hallucinogens, it's amazing experience. It's full of colors, full of all kind of things. And the usual way of explaining, if you have a lot of experience, you should have a lot of brain activity. There should be a connection between your brain activity and your experiences. But here it's the opposite that is happening. It's almost as by turning off the brain, you have more experiences. And that fits with the idea of near-death experiences. Your brain is completely dead and out of it, and yet you have all of these experiences. Turning off the brain sometimes allows more experiences. And this is one of the reasons why in meditation sometimes things start to happen. You start to have more experiences, more powerful things, even though your brain is actually calming down. But the intensity of the feelings and the reality of the things you experience are often greater in meditation than outside. And so people who had deep meditation, they will say that is far more real than any kind of waking experience. You are more mindful, you are more alert, you are more aware, you see things more clearly, everything is more powerful. So the evidence is building up, and there is a shift, I think, happening in the world whereby people are taking the mind far more seriously among philosophers, among neuroscientists. They are changing the outlook, and the mind is being taken much more seriously. We have been through maybe 100 years, 150 years of darkness in the Western world, the darkness of materialism, where the mind is not taken seriously. And that means that you end up with a society that is very impoverished in many ways. If the mind, it doesn't really exist and it's just a functional material phenomena, there is no rebirth, and all there is just, enjoy yourself, go to see the bloomin' Eiffel Tower again. That's kind of what it is all about. Is that all there is to it? Seeing the Eiffel Tower? Okay, well, there must surely be something more than that. So it's a wonderful thing that the mind is being taken more seriously again in the West, because it is an impoverished view of humanity to have this materialist outlook. And so that is good news for everyone that is happening again. Okay, I'm going to do a few more questions. Dear Ajahn, could you please teach us the Mangala Suta? The Mangala Suta. Mangala, I think, is the Burmese pronunciation of Mangala. Mangala Suta, one day, please. Maybe just a summary of some stages. Mangala Suta is a beautiful sutta, and I would maybe do that at Dhammaloka at one time. We can do the Mangala Suta after I finish the present sutta I'm doing at Dhammaloka, which I have been doing for a long time, and we never seem to come to the end of it because I'm there so rarely. So maybe I can go to Dhammaloka more on the Sundays, and we can see what we can do. So I think those 37 suggestions of the Buddha will complement to what you have been teaching us: generosity, morality, and aspects of freedom. Yes, I agree. The Mangala Sutta is very beautiful. It is also very much related to lay life. Many of the things there are, so it's very relevant for lay people. So I think that, so one day maybe we can do that at Dhammaloka Center. So absolutely. We can't do it during this retreat because it will just be too much, unfortunately. Okay, so here we go. What, Ajahn Brahmali, is the purpose and benefit of meditation for one whose mind is dull from the weight of one's past actions? A warm thank you to Norlia. As I understand, she's taking a break to recharge for the next retreat. Between she and Mia, They have been keeping us nourished, happy, and satisfied. Okay, wonderful, yes. So this is, it's always great to have so many people who support these things. So the purpose and benefit of meditation for the mind is dull. Well, you have to be aware of how your mind is working, and then you have to adjust your meditation object, for that dull mind. So if your mind is very dull, then do some walking instead. Take a walk in the bush, contemplate the Dhamma while you're walking in the bush, or just enjoy the peace of the natural environment or whatever. Or if you're going to sit down, do some metta meditation. If you have problem with dullness, listen to a guided meditation. You can listen to guided meditation while you are here, as long as you don't disturb anyone else. That is allowed, according to Ajahn Brahmali, I understand. So if it's allowed to Ajahn Brahmali, then it is allowed under me when I'm here as well. So do something that works. Don't sit there in dullness, because you're quite right. If you just sit there dulling out, dulling out over long, it's not really going to be very beneficial. So try to make it beneficial instead. Do something more active with your mind that enables you to overcome that dullness, at least partially. And then throughout the rest of your life, you say that the weight of your past actions, but remember that those past actions, they can be overcome. Live well, live to the best of your ability, and as you do so, that those actions will start to fade away and not be so important anymore. The famous simile of the lump of salt in the water that the Buddha taught. The lump of salt is your bad actions. The amount of water is the good actions. And the larger you make the pond of good water, in other words, the more good actions you do, the more you dilute the taste of the salt. And after a while, you can't taste it anymore. And all those past actions are gone. And you are happy. You come back to Jhana Grove, and yay, your mind is bright and awake, and you watch the breath, and you feel joy and happiness, and there you are. Suddenly, everything is transformed. The way you are now is not the way you always have to be. The way you are now can change. One of the most difficult things in the world is to understand how much we actually can change. We tend to see things as permanent. We don't understand the potential for becoming a different person. And that lack of understanding the potential blocks us from fully committing and persevering on the path, because we think, this is the way I am anyway, can't really change. So, this is the feeling we have. It's a very, very deep-seated feeling. This is precisely the illusion of the self that makes it felt and blocks you from doing spiritual practice. And this has also been confirmed by modern experiments, by psychological research, that we see change in the past, but we can't see ourselves change into the future. And so remember, you can change. And you can change depends on the commitment and perseverance you have on the path. That is the most important thing here. Isn't that great? Isn't that wonderful news? It is wonderful news. So please take on board that wonderful news, and please do not give up because you have dullness now. Okay, dear Ajahn, what is the significance of maintaining silence during the retreat? Did the Buddha encourage periods of noble silence in those days? I can see that Lehar has been discreetly reminding retreatants not to talk. The retreat has been great so far, and everyone is nice, caring, and helpful. I hope we will also do our part to maintain noble silence till the end of the retreat. So noble silence is part of the idea of being on retreat. And the noble silence, it is noble. Why? Because it encourages good meditation in yourself and the people around you. So even if it is difficult for you to be silent because you feel that maybe your meditation isn't going so well or whatever, give it as a gift to the other people around here. And if you give noble silence to the gift to other people, your meditation will improve, because every gift you give is something that improves your own mind and your own meditation. This is the idea of everything can become a gift, everything can become an act of generosity, everything can become an act of kindness. Whatever that you have to do, make it into that. And then everyone benefits as a consequence. So if you really feel that you have to talk, then do it privately somewhere so that no one else can hear you. Yeah, you can come up to my kuti and have a chat with me if you want, or you can take someone, to a side and maybe go up to the main entrance or whatever of the retreat center or whatever, but do it somewhere where no one really can be disturbed, just out of compassion for everyone else. Yeah, you are giving people a beautiful thing through your silence. So please see if you can do that. So the Buddha did indeed encourage silence in periods, not all the time, but in periods, because that has that kind of benefit. Yeah, you read in the suttas, you read about Anuruddha, Kimbala, and Nandiya, and they would just sometimes use gestures of the hand to communicate, and then they would sit down every 5 days and have a discussion about Dhamma. That's how they would do things. Okay. So a few more questions. I won't go on too much longer. We'll see what happens. Page 2. What happened to page 1? Page 1. Okay, here we are. Okay, dear Ajahn Brahmali, much gratitude for your sutta teachings. I rejoice hearing the Dhamma explanations and feel I am in the company of the most venerable Sariputta when I'm listening to Ajahn. Okay. Okay, that sounds wonderful and marvelous. I'm very happy that you feel that way. So, question. It is the conditioning of self through ignorance from birth that seems so hard to overcome. Yet, when you start to see the process as nama-rupa, mental and physical phenomena, it is evident and see the moment-to-moment arising and passing away of physical mental process, and this gives rising to non-clinging and grasping. Would this be correct? It is correct up to a point. So when you see the arising and kind of ceasing of phenomena, you are seeing the arising and ceasing of part of nama-rupa, part of your experience. Nama-rupa is just another way of thinking about the 5 khandhas. And because the 5 khandhas go very deeply here, and so what you are seeing is just a kind of the surface layer of the 5 khandhas. If you're talking about ordinary life and you're not super duper peaceful, you're seeing a upper layer of what is going on there. And that is already helpful, because it means, as you say, there's less clinging. If a thought comes in your mind, you don't hold on to it, you allow it to pass away, and you can see that. I think everyone can see that to some extent in the meditation, the non-clinging to thoughts. You don't identify with them so much, you are not really interested in them, you just allow them to go. But to really understand deeply this process of not holding on, you have to see things like, for example, the doer itself, the very act of agency. You want to see that as impermanent. You want to see that as uncertain. And that is much more difficult to see. And that can be seen mostly by tranquilizing your mind. Because when the mind becomes tranquil, the doing starts to fade away. And if you can see that the doing is non-self, that is a really, really profound insight. The calmer your mind is, the more peaceful you are, the more insight you get into the sankhara, the chaitana, the doing aspect of the mind. And this is one reason why the samadhi, especially the jhanas, are so incredibly powerful. Because at that time, when the mind is completely peaceful, you understand for the first time that the doer all the time was just an illusion. It was an illusion that you thought it was you, but now it's gone, and you're not missing anything. In fact, you are very happy that the doer is gone. It was a blooming nuisance, this doer, always disturbing you, always making you do this, doing that. But that can only be seen if you become very, very peaceful. And so this is why you want to mix calm and insight, always go together. The deeper the calm is, the more you understand these processes more completely, more fully, more deeply, if you like. And of course, finally, it is consciousness itself is very, very difficult to understand. And that takes even more depth to be able to see properly. Okay, yet when back in society, it seems hard to stay focused and we are drawn to the conventional realities. please recommend how to keep focus. So recommend come more often to Jhana Grove. Yeah, that is the way to keep more focus. It is impossible to keep that focus if you have a busy life. I don't know exactly what kind of life you have, but it is very hard. In fact, it is usually impossible. So what you need to do is set aside times for meditation practice. What you need to do is to go on retreats when you can. What you need to do, maybe come and stay in the monastery, yeah, if you can do that. And otherwise, just do your very best to at least keep your precepts very pure, at least be kind, at least have compassion in the world. And the more purely you can keep your sila, the more powerful your meditation is going to be when you eventually come on retreat. So I think that more important than keeping this focus of a moment to moment arising and passing away of things, more important is to have incredibly pure sila in daily life, because that will improve your mindfulness in the long run, so that when you come on retreat, your insights will be far more profound as a consequence. A lot of metta, a lot of compassion, a lot of kindness in daily life is extremely powerful. That is the foundation for real samadhi, and that is where the real insights will come. Okay. I think I'm going to have to leave a few questions for tomorrow. It's just going to be too long today, so this is the last one I will take, otherwise it's just too much, I think. So, dear Ajahn, how should one develop confidence in the Buddha? Trusting everything that the Buddha says seems to be putting all the eggs in one basket. Great if it works out well, but what if it doesn't? This may be a hindrance of doubt playing with my mind. But the Dhamma also taught us to be investigative. I have these thoughts. What if all this is a cult? Is that what it says? Yes, that's a very good question. So let me get back to that one in a second. A group of people just decided to write down what they think is right. Cult believers always say they are right and everyone else is wrong. Hence, it seems that we are going against the grain of conventional wisdom. Help. Okay, so keep on investigating, yeah? So if it is a cult, then usually you will be abused in a certain ways, you will be trapped, there will be all kind of things going on. Is this a cult? I don't think so. I mean, please make up your own mind, but in my opinion, this is not a cult. And I think one of the things with Ajahn Brahmali is he's almost like an anti-cult leader. Yeah, he does not want to trap you at all. There's no sense that he's controlling you or being coercive or anything. He lets you do exactly what you like. And if you want to destroy your own life, he will allow you to destroy your own life happily. To me, he is the least cultish of all people that I have probably ever met. Yeah, he's completely hands off, basically. And but you observe. You have to be satisfied that this is not a cult, right? So you observe and see if it has the qualities of a cult or not. Look up on the internet the qualities of a cult, yeah, and then see if it matches those qualities or not. So what about this sutta? As a group of people decided to write down what they think is right. Yes, that is true, of course. That is exactly what Buddhism is. But it also goes back 2,500 years. It is an ancient thing. It's not something that was written down yesterday. It is not some random person on the street going around saying, I am enlightened, listen to me. That is not what it is. If that was the case, you would be a bit more skeptical. Something going on for 2,500 years. They have produced some remarkable people in the meantime. Yeah, just look around at some of the Buddhists that have existed in the world. Some of them are really impressive. So look at more than just the people immediately in front of you. Try to get a broader feel for what Buddhism is about. Yeah, this is an ancient religion. It gives it less of a cult feeling. Cults don't tend to last very long. Yeah, they tend to last for a while. Everyone goes crazy, and they kind of, and then and then it kind of blows up, and that's the end of the cult usually. It doesn't last for 2,500 years. And we know, as I mentioned before, I talked a bit about the scriptures, we know that they have been around basically the way they are now for over 2,000 years. That was kind of my answer to one of my previous questions. Cult believers believe that they are right and everyone else is wrong. To that I would say that, of course, the reason I'm a Buddhist monk is because I think the Buddha was right. But that does not mean that I think everyone else is wrong. What does it mean to be wrong? There are degrees of wrongness. And so, for example, I'm quite happy to concede that there are many religions out around the world that do many things right. They do right things in terms of morality, they do right things in terms of meditation. Sometimes they have very, very profound meditations. Like, for example, within the Hinduism and Advaita Vedanta, they get into very deep samadhi. But the one thing that makes Buddhism stand out is the insight into non-self. And that is kind of the hallmark of Buddhism. And so for that reason, I would say that is the one place where the Buddha got it right, and pretty much everyone else gets it wrong at that point. But many, many things are in common. Many things are right. It is not as if all other religions, you go to hell. It is not like that. As I mentioned before, you go to heaven, and when you go to the heavenly realm, there is the Christian corner, there is the Muslim corner, there is the Buddhist corner, there is the atheist corner, because you can be a good Buddhist, or a good Christian, or a good atheist, and so you can also have these things. But whether you will become fully enlightened, well, that is more problematic, because there are certain things you have to let go of to become fully enlightened. You don't have to call yourself a Buddhist, you can call yourself whatever, but you have to let go of certain things for that to be possible. That is really the main issue. In fact, many, many Buddhists have wrong views. Many, many Buddhists will never become enlightened because they don't understand. So in that sense, you could argue that we are not really necessarily Buddhists, right? So you have to kind of follow the teachings that work. You have to kind of be a follower of the Buddha, in a sense. If you get the Buddha's teaching wrong, it's not going to help you to be a Buddhist. Then you're on the same level as everyone else. Anyway, so just what I recommend you is just to reflect on these things a little bit and see if after a while you don't have to call yourself a Buddhist. You can come to these retreats and say that you are an agnostic. I don't really know, and I want to find the way forward, and that's okay. Part of this, as you say, is to investigate. So come here to investigate. No one is going to demand of you that you take an oath that you are a Buddhist or anything. This is one of the nice things about these are quite open places, and we don't want people to feel that they are left out. If you come on these sutras and you are a die-hard Christian, then it might cause some problems, right? Because some of the things might be very offensive to you if that is the case, and I can understand why that might be difficult. But if you are just a general person who doesn't know and you have an open mind, you are very, very welcome to come and then see if it works for you or not, and then make choices down the line. Okay, that is all for tonight. There are a few questions remaining in here, so if we can take those, we'll take those tomorrow. And so I'm going to get to everything, so please don't worry about that. So that is all for tonight. Please, again, enjoy a nice rest tonight, and let's finish off the day with the Arahang Samma Sambuddho.